Today I want to introduce a new firmware version for the Midivolts Desktop and the Midivolts Modular. So this firmware version has a bunch of new updates. However, what I think I'm most excited about is the ability to add additional voices to the Moog Matriarch. So all units will ship with this version of the firmware. So once you receive your unit, you'll first need to enable Matriarch mode, and this is really easy. You'll just send a simple sysx message and it'll set up everything for you. What's really great about using Midivolts in this manner is you do not need to change any settings on the Matriarch. So currently my Matriarch has all default settings applied. Now, if you already have a Midivolts, I'll also provide some information on how you can upgrade your unit. So we're gonna start with a really basic example on how this works. So obviously Moog Matriarch has 4 oscillators. The general idea is we're going to use the modulation section as a 5th oscillator. So currently how this is hooked up is we have the MIDI out on Matriarch going into the Midivolts Desktop, and then we have CV on V0 heading to right in the modulation section, and then wave out heading to noise in the mixer. So I have a really basic patch set up on the Moog Matriarch. So we have sawtooth waveforms for each oscillator, all set to 8 foot. And then on the modulation section, we also have a sawtooth waveform. So just like with the Moog grandmother, the first thing we need to do is tune all the oscillators together. So let's prep for that. So I'm just gonna open up the filter cutoff. These settings are fine. I'm just gonna be using split mode. I just generally prefer that one. And I would switch the Paraphonic switch to 1 just because it makes it a little bit easier to tune, since once you press a note, all 4 oscillators get associated to that note. So also with the Midivolts Desktop, the first thing we need to do is set this to Unison mode, and let's get the oscillators all tuned up. So the way I typically prefer to tune the oscillators, I like to tune each oscillator off of oscillator 1. That way everything's just consistent. So what I would just do is turn down all the oscillators except for 1 and 2, and then we're just going to focus on tuning these 2 together. Now I already tuned the Moog Matriarch, so it should be pretty close, but I'll bring it out and bring it back in a little bit. So that one sounds pretty good. Let's check 1 against 3. That one sounds pretty good. And then 1 against 4. Sounds close. And then lastly, we're going to tune the modulation section to oscillator 1. So this noise in potentiometer controls the amount of signal coming in from the noise in jack. So we'll compare these 2. And for this, I'm going to put it on drone mode because I want to show you some tricks to tuning the rate knob in the modulation section, just because it's a little bit trickier. So once you get it close, you can hold the hold button and then get fine-tuned. So that sounds pretty good. So now what we can do is let's go ahead and turn up all the oscillators. And we're going to switch this back to 4 on the Paraphonic. And the way this works with the Midivolts Desktop is when you want to go to additional voices past 4, the Midivolts Desktop setting should be the amount of added voices. So in this case, because we're just adding 1 oscillator to the engine, this will need to be set on mono mode. If we are adding 2 additional oscillators, you would set it to duo, and so forth. So now that we're all set up here, we should be able to play 5-voice chords. Okay, so you're probably wondering, well, how does this work? Essentially what Midivolts Desktop is doing here is it's listening to the notes pressed on the Moog Matriarch, and it's filling in any stolen notes. So when I play a chord on the Matriarch, the first note played gets associated to oscillator 1, the second note gets associated to oscillator 2, third note, third, and the 4th note to oscillator 4, obviously. Once we go beyond that to the 5th note, oscillator 4 gets reassigned to that 5th note played. Now what Midivolts Desktop does is it recognizes that switch and it puts the modulation section oscillator on that initial fourth note, giving you the ability to create chords past 4 voices. So one thing to remember here is each oscillator in the mixer section has a gate. So when you press a key and release, that single oscillator will turn on and off. In this setup, we don't really have that with the noise in. Basically, MidiVolts Desktop is operating in paraphonic unison and matching each note as you play each note of that chord. So I can kind of show you how that works. If I turn down all the other oscillators and we're just going to listen to oscillator 5, you can hear as I play this chord, it's going to match each new note. So in most cases, most people probably aren't going to notice that small bit of paraphonic unison with the additional oscillators. But what's amazing about Moog Matriarch is we have all these attenuators, and these can be repurposed as essentially gates. So what we're going to do is we're going to send the gate out on V0 to the CV in on the attenuator. Then we are going to send the wave out of the modulation section to the input of the attenuator. And then lastly, we're going to send the output of the attenuator to the noise in. So now when the 5th oscillator gets associated, it'll turn on just like the rest of the oscillators in the mixer section. So now when I play, you can hear it only gets assigned when it's ready to be turned on. So now if I turn up the rest of the oscillators, we should have an engine that works just like the original 4 oscillators in the mixer section. Okay, so one thing you've probably noticed, which is a little bit different when using MidiVolts Desktop with the grandmother, is sometimes this gate LED will remain on after I've lifted my hands. So these aren't stuck notes, this is by design. So if I play a chord and I lift all of the keys at once, Moog Matriarch is assuming that you want to leave the gates on because you're probably using an envelope to decay the sound. So that's why this is left on. If I do that same thing and remove each finger independently, each gate is turning off within the mixer section then. So by matching that, once again, we're further just matching how the Moog Matriarch's mixer engine works. So I think you can probably see where this is going. So I have my small Eurorack system here with 3 independent oscillators, and I have each one of these routed into a VCO mixer, and I have the output of this mixer section going into the noise in on the Matriarch. Now I also have the MidiVolts modular hooked up so that the CV outputs on this modular are getting routed into the CV inputs on each one of my oscillators. So obviously the first step is to tune. I've already done this, but essentially what you would do is you would tune each oscillator to oscillator 1, and then once you're done, you can then start playing. So because we are adding 3 oscillators to the Moog Matriarch, we want to set the MidiVolts modular on Poly 3 mode. Now for this setup, we're using the Paraphonic Unison methodology. However, nothing's stopping you from routing each oscillator to the attenuator and mimicking that mixer gate that the Matriarch's already doing. I'm not going to do that today, probably in a later video, but just wanted to share how the possibilities are really endless on how you could expand your Matriarch. Just want to say I appreciate all the feedback. It's you guys that are the ones inspiring me to come up with these new features with MidiVolts Desktop, MidiVolts Modular, so really appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed the video and let me know what you think. Thanks.